WisconsinEye is in Milwaukee at the Democratic State Convention interviewing U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin. Senator, thanks very much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Washington. The term constitutional crisis is used a lot. Is it indeed a constitutional crisis, Senator?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are, frankly, a form of constitutional crisis. Right now, there have been subpoenas issued as Congress tries to exercise its constitutional responsibility to investigate and to oversee the executive branch, which is hand in hand with other duties like passing legislation and budgets, etc. But we have a system of checks and balances, and they only work when the executive branch complies with subpoenas, allows witnesses to testify, allows the investigation process to occur. Right now, they're refusing. And so, thankfully, we have a third branch of government, the courts, but we will certainly have to go to court to make sure that the checks and balances function, and I think so long as they're not functioning, we have a crisis.
To get these additional documents and testimony from the Don McGahns, do you think the House will have to begin impeachment proceedings, even though it wouldn't go anywhere in the Senate, Senator?
You know, first of all, I think that they should start with trying to force compliance with subpoenas and cooperation from witnesses through the courts. But, you know, they'll have to look at what tools are available, and certainly there's a time sensitivity to all of this. And I don't want to forget to go back to the origin of the Mueller investigation and the fact that was laid out so clearly in Mueller's report, which is that Vladimir Putin ordered an attack on the United States and our democracy. And we need to find out whether this president, was involved and how. But we also have other elections coming up, and we've got to keep a focus on how to make sure that an adversary is not interfering with our democracy.
As an attorney and someone familiar with the Mueller Report, do you think the president did obstruct justice, Senator?
The report illustrates numerous instances where the president either lied or asked someone to lie, where the president asked someone to fire Mueller, who was doing the investigation. It outlines instant after instant where this happened. So we've got to get the truth. We've got to get to the bottom of that. I think in his remarks earlier this week, Robert Mueller clarified and I think pushed back against some of the things that Attorney General Barr had said once he received the report. He said, this report does not exonerate the president. That's Mueller speaking.
Yes.
He also says that had they, through their Mueller investigation, found insufficient evidence or no evidence of interference with the investigation, that they would have said so. But he pointedly said, we did not say that. So I think he's been very clear that he's handing this to Congress to exercise its constitutional role.
And then in the CBS interview, Attorney General Barr said Mr. Mueller could have reached a conclusion. Do you think the Attorney General is acting too much like the President's attorney and not the Attorney General?
Well, I think in terms of this question of whether Robert Mueller could have reached a conclusion, he said himself very clearly there's long-standing practice and precedent at the U.S. Department of Justice that a special counsel does not charge a sitting president. And so, I think he believed that he could not reach a conclusion, but would set forth all the evidence and deliver it to both the Attorney General and Congress to allow us to do our jobs.
With the impasse between the President and the House, how does the rest of government business get done? The raising the debt ceiling, and acting on immigration and disaster aid. Will those items finally, will Congress begin to pass bills that are signed into law?
So I do think that the disaster aid will be approved probably early next week, and the president, prior to Memorial Day, did say he would sign it. So I hope that that has not changed. I think part of the challenge in sort of seeing what's happening in Washington is that there's this, explosive news about the Mueller Report and Russian interference, et cetera, that gets a lot of focus. And, there are things, sort of ordinary business, that doesn't get paid as much attention to or heralded in the same way. On the budget issues, I think we're fairly close between the House and the Senate to getting our spending caps agreed to. And I sit on the Senate Appropriations Committee. I know that we are expecting to start taking up our appropriations bills this month in June, and continuing that until the bills are done. Then there'll be a few more steps to go. We have to pass them and reconcile our differences with the House. But we've been able to do that successfully for the last several years. Now, when you get into the debt ceiling and the president's insistence on directing so many resources towards a border wall rather than what I would consider more efficient border security, more modern and technologically effective border security. But, we don't know whether there'll be an impasse yet again on that, or whether maybe the president will back down, just thinking about the efficient running of government.
And then what about his announcement, 5% tariffs every month going up to 25% in October? Your reaction, Senator?
I have so many reactions to hearing that news. To start with, I think about how our agricultural sector in Wisconsin, in particular dairy, has been challenged and suffered under the tariff and trade war environment that the president has put us in already. This will clearly compound the situation, which is already, at least for dairy farmers, a disaster. We've lost over 1,500 dairy farms since this president took office in Wisconsin. It's over 16% of our dairy farms. That's staggering. Now, it's not all at his feet. We've had low prices, we've had oversupply, we've had weather challenges, climate challenges for our dairy farmers and other farmers. But that aside, it was exacerbated significantly by the tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs. So if Mexico's our biggest export for cheese, and 90% of Wisconsin milk produced goes into cheese, closing off that export market is devastating. And I imagine that they are going to probably double down on their retaliatory tariffs.
Come back with their own tariffs.
Yeah, and they'll probably extend it to corn and soybeans and other things we produce. And then in China, the sort of escalating trade war there has, they've gone after a lot of our specialty crops like cranberries and ginseng. 90% of the cultivated ginseng in the U.S. comes from one county in Wisconsin, Marathon County.
Yes.
And if their export market, biggest one, gets closed off, again, it's devastating.
Last week, Majority Leader McConnell said if there is a Supreme Court vacancy next year, an election year, Supreme Court would fill it. Your reaction in light of 2016 when he didn't even hold hearings on Merrick Garland?
Well, the hypocrisy is as clear as it possibly could be. And all of the hypocrisy around judicial appointments, but particularly the Supreme Court, have meant that we are now seeing a much more politicized court system. If it's going to be an effective third branch in our system of checks and balances, then we've got to work on depoliticizing it, not, this sort of ratcheting up. I think about how fearful people are right now that well-established constitutional norms and rights will be reinterpreted under a newly politicized court.
Well, following up on that, the restrictive abortion laws being passed in southern states, do you expect Roe versus Wade to be overturned, Senator?
Well, what I can say is I believe that those laws were part of a long and relentless strategy to try to set up that prospect. And, they so squarely fly in the face of the right to privacy created and, explained in the Roe versus Wade decision, that they're clearly meant to force the court to re-examine it. A lot of court watchers think that may or may not play out that way. Others think that, some think that there may be a court that takes some sort of incremental approach. But regardless of what approach the court takes, these are intended to challenge a woman's right to privacy and a woman's right to make the most personal of decisions about her health, her reproductive health, when and whether she wants to have children. And it limits these choices in numerous ways, including by driving healthcare providers out of vast regions of the country and threatening physicians who are trying to provide care to, in one case, up to 99 years in prison.
23 candidates, Democrats running for president, including 7 of your fellow senators. Is that healthy, or is that perhaps too many that could lead to problems as your party tries to unseat the president?
I'm really excited about it. I think that the American people are going to get to see the wide range of talent, of intellect, of patriotism, and dedication to this country. The field, to me, is very exciting. I think we saw in Wisconsin that having a big primary for our governor's position was something that actually helped in terms of putting the candidates through their paces, having them, answer a lot of questions, travel around the state. I think the same thing is absolutely going to be true for the presidency. And as we know, I'm sure we'll talk about throughout this Democratic convention, the state Democratic convention, is that the path to the White House, both figuratively and literally, runs right through Wisconsin. We have the convention, the national convention next year, and we know that we're a battleground state. So those candidates have to come, and we're looking forward to welcoming them.
U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Thank you.
That was Barr.